Our speaker is Paul Hoybjerg. He's the founding partner of Hoybjerg Law. His firm specializes in advocating for individuals who've been injured in vehicle collisions, motorcycle trucking accidents, dog bites, slip and fall incidents, as well as victims of abuse. Hoybjerg Law has offices in California, Utah, and Idaho. Mr. Hoybjerg has been published in Massachusetts, Utah, and California, and nationally syndicated magazines. He has been interviewed and presented on multiple podcasts and has appeared on Fox and NBC. He co-founded the Courts and Clergy Lawyers Auxiliary in Sacramento, which combines the efforts of lawyers from the Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, and Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints faiths. Mr. Hoybjerg sits on a board of directors for the Sacramento County Bar Association. Mr. Hoybjerg has used his connections to build bridges with domestic violence centers, minority and religious organizations, and the LGBT community. Mr. Hoybjerg is passionate about helping restore and respect the human dignity of each individual. And with that, we'll turn the time over to Paul Hoybjerg.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to get to speak here today. I apologize I couldn't be in person. I was actually just out in Utah last week for some meetings and had to be in California this week for a few depositions and a few hearings, so I appreciate the accommodation. I also want to thank you for the opportunity. I love the mission of FAIR, faithful answers, informed responses. What a wonderful message that we can ask and increase our faith through questions. My hope today is that I can provide some answers and suggestions as to how you can build relationships with those of different faiths, backgrounds, and orientations. As members of the church, it's critical for us to build relationships with those different than us. In addition to being members of our local wards, we are members of our local faith communities, local government districts, local school districts, and local neighborhoods. There are wonderful parts of the gospel which we can share with everyone, and they will only see them if we provide them with an opportunity that is done in a way that is inviting and respectful. Now, while it can be overwhelming to reach out to those different than us, I can personally tell you of the joy that comes as we love each of God's children for who He knows them to be. Doing so has helped me develop a deeper relationship with my Savior, Jesus Christ, and understand His nature and His character better. Now, I'd like to offer 5 ways that you can build bridges with non-church affiliated individuals, groups, and organizations. The first is to respect and embrace the reason why we build bridges. The second is to embrace your role in this process. The third is to respect and embrace the organizations that you are seeking to build a relationship with. Number 4 is to utilize and seek the opportunities to make those meaningful connections when they come. And lastly, throughout this entire process is to ultimately come to the part where we get to celebrate the differences. Now, number 1, respecting and embracing the reason why we build bridges. Simply put, the reason why we do so and make connections with those different than us is because we are all children of God. He loves us and asks us to love each of His children. Christ spent much of His ministry with those different than the traditional follower. He looked at the soul rather than the status. The 2 great commandments given in Matthew 22 are to love God and love thy neighbor. Now, I'm no scriptorian and I have not read the Hebrew translation, but I haven't read anything that said that the requirement of that second part is that they have an active temple recommend. The scripture and the invitation applies to all. Now, when I reach out to other groups, our motives have to be pure or else it'll show. We must approach them with a singular and unequivocal goal to show them that we believe that they are a literal child of God and that we are there to love them. It has to permeate everything we do and be in every conversation. If we try to build bridges with any other motive, whether it be to try and convert them or for personal gain, it will show. They will see through it. Once they can tell we genuinely care, miracles will follow. With every relationship, that I try to build, my general rule of thumb is that when I approach an individual organization, I want to research all that I can about them so that I am familiar with their purpose. Then I look at how I can help them accomplish their goals while staying true and faithful to my values. I don't ask for something at any point in time in our relationship. I don't approach these organizations and say, I want to become friends with you because here's what you can do for me. What I've noticed is that as I provide a service, a gesture, or a friendship that is good and kind, the other person will naturally ask, Paul, what can I do for you? Or as time develops, we've developed a strong enough relationship in which, like a friend, I can share with them what I'm working on and ask them for insight. If they offer help, wonderful. If not, then their thoughts, ideas, and even just camaraderie are enough. Now, I've been fortunate to have friendships with other individuals, groups, and organizations. I can remember early on in my legal career being invited by an attorney at our office who told me that she wanted me and my wife to come to a mixer, which for those of you that aren't lawyers, a mixer is where a bunch of lawyers get together for a social function. And it's typically done at a bar. And she said, I need you to be there because I can't talk to people and you'll talk to anyone. I asked her what the mixer was, and she said, well, it's at this bar, and it's the African American Asian Lawyers Association. And I had to laugh because I am from a small town in Idaho called American Falls. My grandparents immigrated from Denmark, and my wife is this blonde-haired Bostonian. So it wasn't quite the mold that we typically fit. The extent of my diversity is that I speak Spanish fluently. And so my wife and I went to this mixer and we laughed the entire way. And in fact, we actually sat in the parking lot and thought, what on earth are we doing? Now, while I didn't know exactly why I was going, I had a clear understanding as to what I was going to do and how I was going to approach people. I wanted to make sure that as I spoke with them, I spoke to them with kindness, respect, and a desire to learn about who these people were. I wanted them to be genuinely listened to and appreciated for their good qualities. Now, from that single mixer, I met individuals who I've become dear friends with. It has been those relationships that led me to being asked to be vice president of La Raza Lawyers, which represented all Latino lawyers in Northern California. The friendships continued, and from there, I developed bonds with the governor's secretary over appointing judges, a member of President Biden's cabinet, and a member of even O.J. Simpson's dream team. All because of that singular mixer we went to, we were able to get an invitation for our J. Reuben Clark Law Society, which is the LDS Lawyers Association, an invitation to sit on the board of directors for the Sacramento County Bar Association. Those invitations have continued, and I've become friends with the LGBTQ bar president and her wife. We were also able to develop a council where the lawyers from the Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, and LDS faiths could come together and promote and protect each other. Sometimes as we start to build bridges, we get invited to certain things and we have to laugh about it. But as we approach it and understand that the reason why we're building bridges is to be able to do so to exemplify who we know Christ to be, miracles can follow. I have noticed that when I approach every meeting with sincerity, love, and charity, which is the pure love of Christ, that miracles follow. Loving God and loving his children is the first, middle, and last step to any bridge building. Now, the second step, respecting and embracing your role in the process of building relationships. We have to ask ourselves, what is our role? My mind goes back to a few years back in which there was a round table put on by politicians, judges, and faith leaders here in Sacramento. We were discussing the Supreme Court case that many of you are aware of that involved a cake maker and a gay couple. At this meeting, we were to discuss the merits of the case and our individual viewpoints. Some of the most ardent opponents of religion in California were present at this meeting. I was president of the J. Reuben Clark Law Society and was asked to represent the LDS faith. I spent weeks preparing and agonizing about what I would say. The day before the event, as I was preparing, I got a call from church's legal counsel. And he said, Brother Hoybjerg, we know you're speaking tomorrow, and we want to remind you of one thing. Now, at this point, I had been losing sleep and studying furiously at night about each topic, attendee, the Supreme Court case, and precedent. And I was thinking he was going to say something like, you'll be inspired about what to say, or the Spirit will be with you. But his comment was, and it reminds me of your disclaimer at the beginning of this conference, Brother Hoybjerg, we want to remind you of one thing. You are not authorized in any way, shape, or form to bind the church in any political or legal way. You have no authority on behalf of the church in any regard. But we're praying for you, and good luck. As I got off the call, I kind of started to laugh, and I thought, well, that wasn't the comment I was expecting the day before, but it brought a lot of peace to me, and it put into perfect perspective what my role at the meeting was to be. As 1 Timothy 4:12 says, I was to be an example of the believers. I went into the meeting and had clarity as to what I wanted to say. I was not speaking as an official representative of the church, nor did I have to use certain disclaimers or rote language. I was Paul, a member of the church that loved the gospel he followed and knew the value it had. I knew it was worth respecting, preserving, and protecting. As the conversation went on throughout this panel, there began to be a general consensus that we needed to mold and evolve our beliefs that were inclusive of all other ideas and doctrines. I raised my hand and shared that there will be certain viewpoints and certain doctrines from which we will never evolve. But what can evolve and transpire is a building of trust, dialogue, and friendships from which we can make meaningful compromises. After that meeting, even in meeting with some of the most ardent opponents, they told me that although they didn't agree with what I said, they respected it and they understood why they said it. Your role in building bridges is not to change the church's position. It is not to apologize for its doctrine. You didn't make up the doctrine, nor do you need to apologize for it. Your role is to be an example of the believers. When I get asked tough questions, similar to the ones that Fair addresses, and get asked, come on, Paul, what about X, Y, or Z, something in church history or something with regards to the doctrine? There are some things I don't have answers for. And I have been asked how I can follow something that doesn't provide all the answers. It's not my role to know all the answers. It's my role to love God and to do my best to follow his teachings. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, when you get with folks that are not of the church, you can't necessarily quote Doctrine and Covenants or a previous conference talk because it won't quite connect with them the way that it connects with us. So I found that I use various other resources, including poetry, literature, and also movies. And I responded to them with this story. When I was a kid, my dad tried to inspire me to play hard in sports and give it everything I had. He had me watch the movie Rudy. And for those of you that haven't watched this movie 100 times like I have, it's about a boy who wanted to make the Notre Dame football team, but he was too small and too unathletic. There is a line in that movie that applies here. Rudy is talking to a priest as he's trying to get into Notre Dame, and he asks, have I done everything I can do? Or in other words, what's the answer? The priest's response was, in my 35 years of religious study, I've come to two incontrovertible facts or answers. Number one, there is a God, and two, I'm not him. When I get asked about why certain things happened in church history or why we have a particular doctrine, I share this story and let them know I don't know the answer, but I believe there is a God, and I know he knows the answer, and I trust him. Understanding our role with God helps us understand our role in relationship building. By the way, as I've shared this story, I have yet to receive an unkind response to this analogy. And if anything, it helps put into perspective why I believe what I believe and how I follow. As you approach organizations, don't go to convert or change them or try to steer the church in a different way. Go as a disciple of Christ and as yourself. For me personally, I'm a personal injury lawyer. I help people who get hurt in accidents. I listen to them and share details of their lives. I find that as I have a greater love for each of God's children, it makes me a better advocate. And as I seek truth and am unwavering in my allegiance to integrity and civility, it makes me a more honest and effective lawyer. As I strive to learn about others, it helps me interact with them in a way that is inviting and genuine. Now, as mentioned before, I have offices in California, Utah, and Idaho with very different demographic populations and very different interests. I've found that as I approach the various groups and as I'm not ashamed of my faith, they are much more receptive and respectful. I don't make a big ruckus when they want to meet in bars or the event is a wine tasting event. I have some friends that like going with me because whenever alcohol is served, they get my portion. They know who I am because there is no off switch. There is no equivocating. While they will not always agree or even like what you believe, respect can come when there is a genuine recognition that one's internal faith leads to a greater respect of human dignity for all. As I understand my main and primary roles in my life, which is first, a Christian, two, a husband, father, lawyer, and neighbor, I've found that being good at one makes me better at the other. Embracing my roles helps me build relationships and bridges with those different than myself, as the foundation of each is truth and human dignity. Next, the third point, embracing the organizations that you are seeking to build a relationship with. Map out what you want to accomplish and who you can help to get there. Sometimes relationships are formed without planning, like my La Raza connections, but otherwise, have a plan. It will be exhausting, and you may burn yourself out if you're trying to help every group you come across. Learn who you want to work with and learn what they need. Look for ways that they can be friends with you without it being too expensive to them. An example of this is with politicians. If you are looking to get an in with a politician, don't just have it be an LDS connection. Approach them to attend an event that has multiple faiths, involves youth participation, and provides a greater good. It makes it less risky for them and is beneficial to their own ambitions to be there. Look for any tie that you have. I'm the Assistant Communication and Public Affairs Director for Northern California, which covers the 11 states north of Sacramento. You'd be amazed at how many connections you have through communications and public affairs. The world gets smaller as inevitably somebody knows somebody, and then you have a launching point. By asking them about an organization, you may also realize that there are already connections. Sometimes this helps to not duplicate work that's already been done. My dear friend here told me that she approached a food shelter as part of her public affairs work. She said, "Yes, I'm from the Church of Jesus Christ, and we'd like to help you get resources." The response was, "Oh, that's so nice of you, but we don't need additional help. We get half of our needs from the Mormons and the other half from the LDS Church. But thank you." In this way, you need to do your own research. Where it says in Doctrine and Covenants 9:8 to study it out in your heart and your mind, we've already talked about the heart part, which is the reason why we build bridges. This, in understanding the organization, is the mind and the logical part. Look at the organization and see what they need and see how you can help them. Respect who they are, what they are doing, and why they are doing it. Now, number 4, respecting and embracing the opportunity to make a meaningful connection. Once you've got your heart in the right place, have your sights set on the organization you want to look for, you want to work with, look for the opportunity when you can do something that will benefit them and build trust. Those opportunities don't often come along, so you have to be looking and move when they come. Last year, the LGBTQ bar president sent out an email about an event in which the governor's secretary was talking about how to apply to become a judge. I called the bar president and told them to bring this up at the board meeting and invite the members to attend. At the board meeting, he said, "We'd like to turn the time over to Paul because he has a cool event to share." I responded, "Actually, it's not even my event, but I know the LGBTQ organization is hosting an event on how to become a judge, and I think we should attend and support each other's events." This was a small act. It was not politically divisive, nor was I taking a political stance or even really doing anything other than an email and a 2-sentence blurb. The LGBTQ president was shocked and thanked me over the board meeting, which was really cool to have 20 board members, including members from every minority organization and governor's council, See the LGBTQ president thank an LDS member for their kindness. The following day, she called me and asked me to be on a panel for ways to respect the LGBTQ community at large. I sat on the panel and shared that my faith believes that we are all children of God. My faith is the reason why I treat each member of the community with respect, in accordance with my beliefs and values. With the Latino community, we've gone to different organizations and helped them to promote, fundraise, and build bridges. You will notice opportunities as they come along that you will not think that you had previously. As we get to this point, I would ask you to pray and wait for the opportunity. If it does have a political tie, this is the one thing that I would say. Make sure you're going through the front door, not some side window. I remember when we wanted to join the Sacramento County Bar Association, because of my La Raza connections and even just other friendships, we had a strong invitation from all the other board members. But we didn't get approval from the church for some time. And we waited for years. We made sure that we had all the documentation because we didn't just want to do something and then later on apologize or later on ask for permission or for forgiveness. We wanted to make sure that we did it the right way, because when you build bridges and you build them on solid foundations that can be repeated, and when you build them on foundations that are clear, concise, and have a strong foundation, then they last. We were able to get church approval, and with the help of a few other BYU members, change a few of the J. Roone Clark bylaws so that now not only could we join the bar and sit on that board, but any other chapter throughout the country can do so as well. When we talk, and kind of this last point about celebrating the differences, I like using the term respecting human dignity, as it leads itself to encompass all of God's children and the importance of treating each individual with respect. As we do this, there is a great celebration of respect, tolerance, and peace. Peace is not the absence of differences, it's the presence of respect. Now, in your efforts, I promise you miracles. God will give us gentle guidance that will bless every aspect of our lives. There can be a celebration as we become united with those of different backgrounds, beliefs, and orientations to advocate that all persons are treated with civility. No one should be bullied, beaten, or shamed. We respect and value all of God's children as each human has value. We celebrate that we are different. A few months ago, I got to speak at the BYU Religious Freedom Annual Review. At night, there was a panel moderated by Elder Quentin L. Cook. One interaction was so funny. The Jewish rabbi said, "It is my belief that when the Messiah comes," and the Christian panelist who was next to him and was a dear friend of his interrupted him and said, "When he comes again," and he said, "You always forget the again part." The rabbi laughed as this comment came from a dear friend, and he said, "Yeah, for me when he comes, for you when he comes again." And everyone laughed. This just joke and even just this jest was such a classic example to me, and a wonderful example that even though we have differences, when we have developed a friendship and when we have developed a respect and even just a mutual adoration, we can enjoy things and there can be joy. I remember going to a La Raza meeting at the Mexican consulate, and there was over 150 people, and they had passed out to these 150 people shots of tequila. And I was sitting there and just laughing as I had my little thing of Sprite, and they passed these out and they were singing this Mexican song. And I laughed as I said, "You're a long ways from Idaho, Paul." And as I got to be with my friends and even just getting to enjoy their differences, they knew that I wasn't drinking tequila, and they knew that I wasn't there for that, but they knew that I was there to respect and enjoy them. In the process of bridge building, I want to remind you it's okay to laugh and have fun. You'll have experiences that you never thought you had. Embrace them and keep a prayer in your hearts for strength and for those around you. With some of our dear Catholic friends, when our son was born, I had one beg me to be our son's godfather. And I had mentioned to him, "Well, it's not really what we do." And he said, "Well, I'd be honored if I could. And is there any way that I could be his proverbial godfather?" And I said, "Of course." And even then he still jokes around and he checks in with me every once in a while to check up on my son. we can build relationships with other groups that are wonderful. Now, while there is joy in the process, I will mention it's not always easy. It's uncomfortable and stretches us beyond our comfort zone. I remember when we were kids, we would get out of the tub and we would tell my mom, "Mom, I'm cold." And she would say, "That's okay. That's how you should feel. If you didn't feel that way, I'd be worried." She would then wrap us up in a warm blanket and the discomfort would quickly disappear. If we're truly reaching out to those different than us, it's okay to feel an awkwardness or a level of discomfort. That's how we should feel, or we're not stretching enough. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to meetings where I'm the only one that looks like me, believes like me, or has the same interests. I have felt alone and uncomfortable. My sweet mother's words come back to me, and with a prayer, I am wrapped up in the warmth of God's love, and I gain strength and purpose. I want to thank all of you guys and all of you for being here and for your efforts, and even just your desires to participate and learn in a place like FAIR. You're in my prayers, my dear friends, and I pray for your courage and for your success. Thank you again.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate your words, and I think you've given us a lot to think about. I have a couple of questions here for you that people have sent in. What do you think is the best way to handle hostile confrontations? You know, sometimes you come in with the best of intentions and you're met with hostility.
That's going to happen. And I think you have to prepare for that hostility. And often what I found is that you go to the base of what you can build upon. Whether that's, hey, do you believe that it's okay? It's just like the and I'll just give an analogy. The LGBTQ bar president told me, well, you know, Paul, really, our community really gets bullied a lot, and you guys just don't understand. And I had told her about an experience that I had in which we had a kid in the Bay Area who, because he was a member of our faith, really got targeted and really got bullied to the point that he became suicidal because of how hostile people were to his faith and to his beliefs. And I mentioned that to her. And I said, do you think that's okay for there to be a bullying against people just because of their faith? And she said, well, no. And I said, don't you think it's important for all of us to have that respect? She said, well, yeah, of course I do. And so I think that when you meet that level of hostility, go to the basics of human dignity, almost where they can't really refute it. Look for ways that you can be able to draw a meaningful connection. Because I've gone into really hostile environments, and the best way that I've handled it is to get to a base that we can agree on, some sort of principle that we can agree in, or some sort of joint project that we can work on together, whether it be a domestic violence center, whether it be a food shelter, something like that, something that we can try and make that connection. And if that doesn't work, what I will then share is I will tell them, hey, let me tell you the reason why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I want to preserve and protect doctrines that make me want to treat you better. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to convert you. I'm not here to change you, nor do I expect you to change because of me. But I do expect for you to have respect for me, and that's what I want to extend to you.
Thank you. So another question comes in and says, Elder Holland has said, as we show love, we should avoid being an advocate of LGBT actions. Is there something you specifically wouldn't do that crosses the line from showing love to advocating? Or do you have any guidelines to give us on that?
Definitely. I think it's one of those things that for us, we don't equivocate on doctrine. And the doctrine of what is instructed in the temples with regards to sexual relations is very clear. And so I think that what we can do is that we can obviously extend our arms in love and to be able to mention that we believe that we're all children of God. But I think when it comes to the equivocating or saying how the church should change its position or where the church has been wrong, that crosses a line and I don't get there. So oftentimes what I will mention to them when they say, well, do you believe that, that LGBT folks should be allowed to be married in the temple? Do you believe that? That's when I get back to what my role is. No, that's not really my place. For me personally, I believe that God loves each and every one of his children. And I'm cognizant and aware of what every person is is dealing with and how they choose to live their lives, but that's not really my role. And so when they ask, well, do you want to take this position or take this position? Kind of my position has been, we're children of God and we love them. But from a church doctrinal standpoint, I don't like deviating. And I think that President Oaks has been very, very clear that the church will change its position on certain parts of that deal with the LGBT organization and with the community when God changes his position. And until that happens, they're not authorized to change their position. And that's how I feel too.
Okay, I have another one on being hostile confrontations that says, have you encountered personalities that are disrespectful regardless of your actions? And how do you respond to that, where they don't back down?
Oh, definitely. At that one meeting I mentioned, the Catholic judge that I went to where I was the LDS voice, actually, one of the other ones afterwards, after this meeting, she said, hey, I really respected what you said, but just so you know, we pressured you to change your position on a few other issues, and we'll just continue to pressure you until you change. And at that point, I just kind of smiled with her and I said, you know what? I said, we love you and we appreciate you. But just so you know, these doctrines that I believe in, they don't come from man, they come from God, and we'll do our best to follow him. And I shook her hand and wished her the best. And to be honest with you, what I had done beforehand, before that meeting, and it was my sweet wife's idea, but our daughter was being blessed. And I had actually invited every member of the panel to our baby blessing and to our home afterwards. And none of them showed up. And afterwards I said, but hey, if ever you're in the Roseville, Rockland area, we'd love to have you over at our home. And she kind of taken a little bit back by that. And she said, okay. And I said, well, let us know. And we would have loved to have had her in our home, because for all the things she may hear about the LDS faith, that's where she came. And if she saw my sweet children, my sweet wife, I think she'd be able to see that there's some value there.
So if we have an interest in building bridges, whether it be with other faith denominations, other nonprofit work that's going on with the LGBT community, or any of those areas, and we don't know where to start, just for our average member, we don't have a position of communications director, or we don't have a position that's outlined in the church. Where should we start? Where should we start looking?
Show up to an event, show up to a joint event, and just show up. One thing that as I've read about with Brigham Young, that one way in his early interactions with the church, he showed up early and he stayed late. Show up to these other organizations and just offer to set up or offer to take down. One thing and you can do that as an individual member. And as you notice what different organizations they're doing, whether it's the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, even a local food shelter, show up and even just help them to be able to set up. Sometimes members go, especially in tough economic times, well, I don't have thousands of dollars to donate to these organizations. Well, if you have a Saturday morning, call them and say, hey, I'm just a member here. I'm just a person here. I'd love to be able to help out. And you just show up, and even if it's just sweeping or just doing whatever it is, some sort of maintenance work for them, that can be often the most effective way to make an in. Rarely do I go into these organizations and mention my official title with the church, simply because I'm not trying to act as the official representative of the church. And also they're kind of on guard, if that makes sense. It seems like I want something. The Latino organization that I approached, I remember talking to them and they said, so do we have to pay tithing? We know that you guys do tithing. Do we have to pay tithing if you guys help us out? I thought, no, we're literally offering to give you guys some extra food from the bishop's storehouse. Like, no, this has no ties to it. So I think even for the individual member, that can be the most effective one, because you're not going with any other motive other than just, I love God and I love my neighbor, and this is a way to start.
Well, I do know, based on your comment, one thing that every Latter-day Saint is really good at is setting up and taking down chairs. So we have lots of practice, and vacuuming floors.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate your time and appreciate the time you spent with us and how you've and the information you've shared with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate all of you. And feel free, if ever you have any questions, let me know. And I'm always happy to be a resource for you.
Thank you.